Hi everybody, and welcome back to Franklin Cattle Farms. Today on the channel, we have a Winchester Model 52A sitting on my workbench. This is a new style of video for us here at Franklin Cattle Farms. Today we'll be replacing the firing pin spring in this old Winchester and get her back in service. This rifle is one that I acquired recently in a trade and took it out to the range, and it proved itself very capable in the accuracy department. And however, reliability was less than stellar. I would get some failures to fire, and well, it needs a new spring. Luckily, the fellows over at WC Wolf Springs carry the spring for this Winchester. Ordered one up for $7, and well, here we are. Now, the reason why I'm making this video is because, well, basically the internet says that this is a task that, shouldn't be attempted by anyone who doesn't know exactly what they're doing, or for the most part, the internet says not to do this. It's not that hard, and the only thing that you'll need that is special is you'll need to make your own spring compression tool. Now, we'll highlight this later in the video. We'll pull you in closer, and I'll show you exactly what I'm working with. So you'll need this tool. You will need I use a dime that has been cut in half with a pair of dikes. Cut it in half. Obviously a hammer, punch that fits your pins, large flat blade screwdriver, and a punch block. So this Winchester rifle actually dates to 1938. It's equipped with Marble-Goss sights. Actually, the front one is a Vaver sight, and the rear one is the Marble-Goss micrometer sight. This rifle is in pretty good condition. It was obviously somebody's target rifle at some point in history. However, now it's my target rifle to play with. So let's get this thing back to service, and I'll pull you guys back here, and let's see if we can't get it back up and running. Alright, here we are back at the table with a close-up. First thing I'm going to show you guys how to do is how to remove the bolt. And believe it or not, this was one of the more difficult things to find on the internet, was how to remove the bolt from a Winchester Model 52A and or pre-A. Most people said to push forward on the trigger. That seems to be true for later iterations of this rifle. However, with this particular rifle and models that came before it, so pre-A and or A models, the procedure is to remove this, obviously holding the rifle up, and to pull the trigger with the bolt open. Now obviously this rifle is clear, so you're going to pull the trigger, and obviously pulling the trigger doesn't do anything. Most people think that that's enough to release it. However, you have to pull much harder. You'll pull and then you'll pull, and the bolt will proceed to come out. If you pull it again, kind of hard to do here. Need 3 hands with the way the camera is set up. So here's the actual part we'll be working on. So we'll dispose of the rifle for a minute, lay it over here, and we'll have the bolt to work on. So for this project, you will need, like I said earlier, a new spring. This is a Wolf spring. I used a dime. I cut a dime in half to use as a spacer. I'll show you that later. You'll need a flat-bladed screwdriver. You will also need a hammer. And this is the most important part of this process, if you can see this. What this is a tool that I made using the internet, actually. Well, the internet and a Dremel tool. This is to compress the spring with inside the bolt body. Now what this is just a cheap screwdriver from Walmart that I cut the actual bit end off of and proceeded to machine, or rather grind out the shank so that there's 2 little forks on each side, so that the pin, we'll use the punch here as an example, that the pin that's keeping the spring captured can go between these 2 forks, while the spring can be compressed by the 2 forks on the outside, okay? That's how this works. This is the one important tool that you will need to do this. The other tool that would come in very handy is a vise. However, you can get around that. So let's tear into this thing. Now, the first step in this process is to remove this small piece of metal here. If you can see that seam, that is called the bolt handle retaining plate. Now, like I said, this plate is only present on the A models and the pre-A models. Later designs, well, I don't have one of those, so you guys will just have to find another way to take it apart. It's probably easier, actually. So, what you'll need to do for this is that the pin actually bisects this entire part. There's actual bolt handle assembly here. So, we're going to take this, rest it down on the block, take our punch, rest it on that pin very carefully. Actually, rest that in the hole there. And we will take our hammer, using whichever end you choose, and whack, 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 whack. Okay, there it comes out. All right, as you can see, punch is through, pin is out. We'll stick this over here for safekeeping. We'll remove the punch, and we will press this out with our screwdriver blade. And there is the bolt handle. Oops. There is the bolt handle retaining plate. Now what this does is it rides in a channel within the bolt body, preventing the bolt handle from coming back under any spring tension or when it's pulled. So we'll decock it just by turning. As you can see, there is the bolt is now decocked. Now this is the tricky part that a vise would come in very handy for. You have to pull these two pieces apart while finding the pinhole and pin that's retaining the firing pin spring and proceeding to jam this piece of dime between the two pieces in order to access that pin with this punch. Now, I'm going to see if I can do it here real quick. If not, I'm going to have to go find somebody to help me, and then I'm just going to, you guys can see what happened, okay? So what we're going to have to do, what I'll do is I'll hold this piece of dime with my index finger, and I will, if I can get it here, pull back almost. Let's do this again. As you can see, this is why a lot of people on the internet deem this to be impossible. So I'll hold it with my thumb now. I'll pull back. And there it is. So as you can see, the piece of dime is now stuck between the bolt handle and the bolt body, and the spring inside is compressed. So now, this comes the easy part. Take your punch again. As you can see right here, I'll highlight it with the point of the punch. There's the pin that needs to be driven out. That's the firing pin retaining pin, firing pin spring retaining pin. So we'll lay this here on the block. We'll put our punch on it. Fiddle with it here. Let me turn this so you can see. Fiddle with it. Take your punch. Take your hammer. And this piece on the end here, before we do this, this threaded end cap will retain the spring. That's the one thing that I didn't realize why everyone on the internet, who even with the later models, was saying to remove this. If you remove this, the spring goes and flies across the room, and well, it hits your dog, and you don't want it to hit your dog. So, not that that happened to me, it didn't. So, the punch will retain the spring until the punch is removed. So, I'm going to drive this in. Sorry for the fumbling. All right. Now there is the firing pin spring retaining pin right there. We'll lay that off to the side. Now what we're going to do is remove the punch. The spring is being retained by the punch, so we're going to go, and that's going to shoot across the room.
that's another thing that I forgot to mention. So instead of the spring shooting across the room, the entire firing pin assembly will fly across the room. How interesting. So now you know that. So I guess in that case you could undo the end cap here and press it against a piece of rag or something of that nature and then release it. Then the spring would come and it wouldn't fly across the table. However, that's out now. We'll take our flat bladed screwdriver. We will unscrew this threaded section, pressing back on it since there might be some spring tension on it. Yes, there was a little bit. There's our threaded end cap and our firing pin spring. So now let's replace it. Here we have our new spring here. Get it out of the package. This is a Wolf Extra Power spring. Brand new, very nice. As you can see, it appears to be a little shorter than the original, believe it or not. But it is, the coils are thicker, so hopefully this will do the job. Let's see how it does. So, as you can see, there's the channel. I'll point it out with the punch. There's the channel that the bolt handle retaining plate rides in, right there. So, put the firing pin spring back in. Excuse me, we're doing this backwards already. So, we'll put the firing pin spring inside the actual striker assembly here. And let's see how I want to do this. Let's put this in here. Okay, so as you can see, the spring is uncompressed. Now this is where your handy dandy homemade tool comes in. So what we'll do is we will put the bolt handle back on. That looks right. Put the bolt handle back on. We will put the firing pin spring and striker back in. All right, at this point, this is the hard part. So, take your half dime or half penny or whatever you wish, and jam it once again between the bolt body and the bolt handle. As you can see, there's a nice gap right there. You're going to want to support this somehow or another by jamming that in there. Then let's see how I want to do this. Then compress this spring. And once you compress this spring, everything will hold itself together, if that makes any sense. So we're going to compress this spring with our handy dandy homemade tool, looking into the hole and making sure that the clearance is there. And we're going to jam our punch back through the hole and remove the bolt from the block. As you can see, the firing pin spring is now captured. So now comes the other fun part. You're going to have to pull this out. Actually, safety precaution, we're going to put this little threaded end cap back on. I'm going to thread that back on just so the mass is increased so that that whole piece will fly across, not the spring, and it won't kill me if it comes out of here. Safety glasses would probably be a good precaution. Wish I had some. So we're going to pull this punch back until it's just below the surface of the hole. All right, I don't think you guys can see that, but that punch is just below the surface of the hole. Okay, so now we're going to take our pin. We're going to rest our pin in there very carefully. We're going to take our hammer, give it a couple solid whacks, which will set it in there. And now we're going to hold it in the air, hitting it a few more times. All right, now as you can see, the punch has pulled back under spring pressure. So what we're going to do, let's get dangerous here again. Pull this screw out, and we're going to inspect to see if the pin has gotten around the spring, which it has not. We're going to take our punch, press down, And this might not be the best way to do it, but usually it seems to work. We're going to look in there. Okay, everything looks good. We'll take our hammer and give it a couple of raps. Alright, there went that. Support is not necessary anymore, so no more half dime. We're going to risk our vision again. Everything looks just fine now. Okay, we can remove the punch. Look one more time, make sure everything looks okay. Yeah, it does. I will explain to you what I'm looking for here in just a second. So, I'm going to drive this in the correct way with the punch. Put in the punch on top of the pin. And 2, 3, 4, 5. Clamp back, obviously without the support of the dime. Alright, everything is just fine now. Fantastic. Let me look in there. Alright, now what I'm looking for here is what seems to be a design that can be easily messed up. So this is the old firing pin spring. Now what I'm looking for is within inside this bolt, the pin obviously goes through the bolt body. Now, as you can see, it goes through the bolt body. Now what can happen is when you're driving that pin in, occasionally one side of the spring can get deflected around either the punch or the pin, so you end up driving the pin through one coil of the spring, just as so. So, what I'm making sure by looking down into the hole here is that the pin is coming across evenly and supporting the entire width of the spring, not getting caught in between a coil. So, I actually took this bolt apart once before doing this video, and I noticed that it had been assembled as such, the incorrect way. As to if that happened at Winchester, I don't know. I have to imagine it didn't, and somebody's been in here in the last 80 years. So we're just going to assume that somebody's been in there. The last step in this entire process, or one of the last steps rather, is to reinsert the bolt handle retaining plate, as you can see right here. So what we're going to do, rest this in, if I could put it in the right way. And we're going to rest this in here and just line it up right there. For the most part, it seems to fit pretty well. We're going to take our pin, rest the bolt against this block, rest the pin in there. It's non-directional. And we're going to go tap, 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 tap. And everything is flush. The very final step is to insert this little cap screw. We're going to start it off and then run her down here. If I could get the blade in there, run it down, snug it up, and check the bolt for function. So we're going to cock the bolt, decock the bolt. Everything looks good. Everything feels like it's moving smoothly. And one of the final steps here, we'll actually take the rifle and bring it over to the bench here. Hopefully you guys can see that in full frame. Now, to reassemble this bolt, obviously, as you can see, it is decocked at the moment. So let me lay this rifle comfortably here. I'm going to recock the bolt. As you can see, with the bolt handle 90 degrees of the flat at the bottom. I'm going to keep the rifle from falling off the table here. So, I'm going to hold the rifle up. Do this with 2 hands, even though 3 would be nice. Stick it in there. Pull the trigger all the way back. And finagle it. It'll finagle, finagle, finagle. Come on, go in there. And there she goes. They are a little bit picky sometimes. Now, with this particular firing pin design, dry firing this will not harm it. So, let's give it a test. Oh yeah, that sounds much better than it was. A lot more powerful. Now, the real test, we'll be taking it to the range or the backyard and popping off a few. However, that seems much better. Now, I'm glad that's working well. Now, if you viewers enjoyed watching this and enjoy our Franklin Cattle Farms videos, please consider subscribing and well, leave your comments in the box below and tell us how we're doing. And well, mainly tell us if you want to see any more videos like this. Me personally and all of the guys here at Franklin Cattle Farms have quite a few military surplus rifles that occasionally need a little gunsmithing here and there. And if you guys want to see that process, comment below and tell us what you think. Thanks a bunch for watching, and join us next time on Franklin Cattle Farms.